You know what hurts the most? It's not when strangers betray you. It's when the ones you raised, the ones you'd give your life for, look you in the eyes and still lie. I learned that at 81 years old. In the same house where I raised my son, David Carter. My name is Helen Carter. I'm 81 years old. A retired school teacher from a quiet little town in Kentucky. I taught English for 40 years. And I believed education could fix almost anything. But life has a different syllabus. It tests your heart more than your mind. I live alone in a white house with green shutters. The kind of place where the porch creaks and the birds know your name. My husband, Frank, passed away about 12 years ago. After that, my world got quieter, smaller, lonelier. My son promised to visit every week. But those visits grew shorter. Then less frequent. And then, only when he needed something. At first, I told myself he was just busy. I made excuses for him, like mothers do. But one morning, when he showed up all cheerful and smiling, I felt that old gut instinct. The one teachers get when a student's lying about his homework. "Mom," he said, "you shouldn't worry about your money anymore. Let me take care of it. You're old now, you forget things. I'll handle your bank, your papers. You just rest." I smiled and poured him coffee, pretending I didn't. Notice how his eyes kept drifting toward my study door, the room where I kept my old metal safe. That safe held a lifetime of work, my savings, Frank's pension, and a few pieces of jewelry that weren't worth much to anyone but me. I didn't say no. I didn't say yes. I just said, "We'll talk about it later." But that night, I couldn't sleep. Something in my chest felt tight. I walked to the study, opened the safe, and took one last look at everything inside. Then I closed it again and thought to myself, I need to know who my son really is now. The next week, I made a quiet decision. I emptied that safe. Every single bill, every document, I moved it to a safety deposit box at the bank. And in its place, I left something simple, a letter. A folded piece of paper that said, "You just broke my trust, not my safe." I didn't tell a soul. Not even my neighbor, not even my pastor. I wanted to see how far my son would go. A few nights later, around midnight, I woke up to a sound downstairs. I knew that sound, the soft squeak of the study door. My heart hurt more than it raced. I walked quietly to the top of the stairs and saw the faint light from his phone flashlight. He was crouched in front of the safe, whispering curses under his breath. I didn't stop him. I just watched. A mother watching her son steal from her, that kind of pain doesn't have words. When he finally pried it open, I saw him pull out the letter. He unfolded it, read it, and froze. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he threw the paper across the room and stormed out, slamming the door. I sat on the stairs for what felt like hours. Not crying, not angry, just empty. You raise someone. Feed them, protect them, and one day, they look at you like you're just another obstacle in their way. The next morning, he didn't come back. No calls, no messages. But word travels fast in small towns. A week later, a friend from the grocery store told me she saw David trying to sell a gold bracelet that looked a lot like mine. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and walked home slowly, feeling like the world had grown heavier. But see, here's the thing about growing old, you don't lose your mind. You gain patience. And I decided that if he wanted to play this game, I'd finish it on my terms. That was the day I started my little plan. I didn't go to the police. I didn't even tell my friends. At my age, you start choosing your peace over your pride. But I wasn't going to let my son get away with it either. The next morning, I went to the bank and met a young woman named Clara. She looked barely 30. But she listened carefully when I told her I needed to make sure all my accounts were secure. I told her about my son, that he might try something foolish. She nodded softly and said, "Don't worry, Mrs. Carter. We'll take care of everything." She helped me change my access codes, moved my savings into a new account, and even suggested a password that only I could remember, something no one would ever guess. It was my husband's favorite phrase, "Stay kind, but not blind." That afternoon, I went home and made tea. The quiet house felt heavier than usual. My son didn't call. Days passed. Then a week. I kept expecting him to show up, angry or ashamed, but nothing. I told myself he was reflecting, maybe realizing what he'd done. But that hope ended when I got a call from the bank one evening. They said someone had tried to access my account using my old credentials. "Was it you, Mrs. Carter?" they asked. I said no. My heart broke a little more. I spent that night sitting on my porch, watching the sun dip behind the trees. The fireflies came out, blinking like tiny memories. And I started talking to Frank, my husband. I do that sometimes when things feel too heavy. "You'd be disappointed, Frank," I whispered. "You always said David had your heart. Maybe he still does, but it's sure gone cold." The next morning, I called my lawyer, Mr. Lawson. He'd been my friend for decades, ever since I taught his daughter in 3rd grade. I told him everything. He was quiet for a while and then said, "Helen, you're not the first parent this has happened to. But if you want to protect yourself, let's do it properly." He came by that afternoon with papers and a serious look on his face. "I can help you set up a will, and if anything happens, the right people will know the truth. But Helen, you need to accept that your son isn't the boy you remember." That sentence stayed with me. He isn't the boy you remember. I signed the papers. I didn't even blink. I left everything, my money, my home, my pension, to a local charity that helps single mothers and children. I taught too many kids who came from broken homes to let my story end in bitterness. But I didn't stop there. I wrote one final letter, one that Mr. Lawson promised to deliver only if something ever happened to me. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. I wanted David to know that I saw him for who he'd become. For a while, life went quiet again. I went back to my little routines, morning coffee, crossword puzzles, talking to neighbors. I even baked cookies for the kids next door, just to hear laughter in the yard again. Then one Saturday morning, I saw David's car pull up. I watched from the window as he sat there for a long time before finally stepping out. He looked thinner, older, tired. He knocked softly on the door. When I opened it, he smiled a little, like he was testing the waters. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, David," I said, keeping my face calm. He looked around the house like he was searching for something, probably checking if the safe was still there. "I just wanted to see how you were doing." "I'm fine," I said. "You?" He shrugged. "Just busy. I've been thinking about things." I could see the guilt behind his eyes, but also the calculation. He wasn't here to apologize. He was here to see what he could still get. I poured him some tea and sat down across from him. After a few minutes of silence, he said it. "Mom, I was wondering if you could help me out. Just a small loan. Things have been rough." I smiled. "Rough how?" He sighed. "The usual. Work's been slow. I'm behind on rent. Just until I get back on my feet." That old ache returned to my chest, but this time I didn't let it show. I said, "You know, David, I don't keep money here anymore. Everything's handled through the bank." He looked annoyed. "Well, can you transfer something? Just a couple thousand?" I shook my head. "No, dear. I can't." He frowned. "Why not?" I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Because I learned my lesson." He froze, probably realizing what I meant. For a moment, the silence between us felt thick enough to touch. Then he stood up, muttered something under his breath, and walked out. I didn't stop him. I just whispered a quiet prayer that maybe, someday, he'd understand what he lost. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Not yet. After that visit, I didn't hear from him for almost 2 months. The silence was heavy, but it was also peaceful. I stopped checking my phone for messages that never came. I started walking to the park again, talking to the same old friends who actually cared to listen. Then one morning, the peace cracked. There was a loud knock at the door. I opened it and found 2 men standing there, one in a suit, one in a uniform. "Mrs. Carter?" The man in the suit asked politely. "Yes?" "I'm with First State Bank's fraud department. We need to ask you a few questions about recent activity on your account." My heart sank, but I kept my face calm. "Come in," I said. We sat at the kitchen table. The younger man opened a file and said, "There's been an attempt to withdraw $50,000 from your savings. The signature matched yours almost perfectly. The transaction didn't go through because your account is flagged for verification." I felt my throat tighten. "I didn't sign anything," I said. He nodded. "We know. That's why we're here." They asked if I knew anyone who might have access to my documents or old records. I didn't hesitate. "My son, David Carter." They exchanged looks and took notes. "We're not accusing anyone yet," the officer said gently. "But the attempt came from his location. We just needed to confirm." When they left, I sat there for a long time, staring at the cup of coffee I hadn't touched. It was cold now, like something inside me. That night, I pulled out an old photo album. There were pictures of David when he was a little boy, holding his first bike. Missing a tooth, covered in birthday cake. I traced my finger over his smile and whispered, "Where did you go, my child?" The next morning, I called my lawyer again. "Mr. Lawson," I said, "it's time we finalize everything." He came by with a calm look, like he already knew what I was about to say. "You sure, Helen?" "I'm sure." We spent the next few hours sorting through documents, signing papers, and setting everything in motion. The house, the accounts, the life insurance, all of it went to charity. Exactly as we'd planned. But I added one more condition. I asked him to deliver a sealed envelope to David when I passed away. "What's in it?" he asked. I smiled. "Just the truth." Weeks passed quietly. Then, one evening, there was a knock on my door again. When I opened it, David stood there, holding a small grocery bag. He looked worn down, defeated. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. "Hello, David. I brought you some fruit," he said, avoiding my eyes. "That's kind of you." He stood there awkwardly, like a child caught doing something wrong. "I heard about the bank." "I swear, Mom, I didn't mean to." I raised my hand. "Don't lie, David. You're still my son. I know when you're lying." He swallowed hard. I needed help." "You needed honesty," I said quietly. "You chose greed instead." He looked away, his jaw tight. "You always loved your students more than me," he muttered. That hurt. Deeply. But I didn't show it. I said, "No. David. I loved you enough to forgive you every time you broke my heart. That's the problem." He didn't answer. He just turned around and walked away, leaving the bag on the table. I waited until he was gone, then opened it. Inside were apples and oranges, and a folded piece of paper. It was a bank withdrawal slip. My name, forged again. That was the moment I realized there was nothing left to fix. The next morning, I went to the police myself. I filed a quiet report. I didn't want him arrested. I just wanted a record, a truth that couldn't be erased or twisted. The officer, a young woman with kind eyes, listened carefully. When I finished, she said softly, "You're doing the right thing, ma'am." Maybe I was. Maybe I wasn't. But I was tired of being afraid in my own house. That night, I walked to the safe again. It still sat there, open and empty. The same note lay inside, "You just broke my trust, not my safe." I picked it up and smiled sadly. "Guess it's time to rewrite that," I said to myself. I took out a pen and added a line beneath it, "But you also broke your own heart, son." Then I folded it, placed it back inside, and closed the door. A few months passed. The leaves started to turn golden again, and the air in Maplewood felt softer. Life slowed down, the way it does when you stop chasing pain. One afternoon, my lawyer, Mr. Lawson, stopped by again. "Everything's in place, Helen," he said, setting a folder on the table. "Your accounts are secured, the will is finalized. And the donation clauses are legally protected. No one can touch a cent without authorization." I nodded, feeling lighter. "Thank you, Lawson. You've been more like family than my own." He smiled sadly. "You deserve peace, Helen." After he left, I sat by the window, watching the sunset spill across the sky. It looked like fire and gold, beautiful and unforgiving at the same time. A week later, I heard from the police again. "Mrs. Carter," the officer said over the phone, "we've closed the case. The person who attempted the forgery has admitted responsibility." I took a slow breath. "And?" "He won't face jail time. He agreed to repay the damages and attend counseling. We thought you should know." I thanked her and hung up. My hands were steady, but my heart was heavy. I wasn't happy or angry, I was just done. That night, I cooked myself a small dinner. The same way I used to when David was little. Chicken soup, soft bread, and tea with honey. I sat at the kitchen table, eating slowly, listening to the old clock tick. When I finished, I looked at the camera on my counter, the one my granddaughter, Lily, had set up for me to record little storytime videos for her school project. I turned it on. "Hello, Everyone, I said softly, my voice steady but warm. My name is Helen Carter. I'm 81 years old. A retired teacher from a small town in Maplewood, Indiana. And today, I want to tell you something about family, trust, and strength. I smiled faintly. Sometimes the people you love the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. But revenge isn't about shouting or fighting back. It's about standing your ground and showing them you can't be broken. I paused, looking straight into the camera. I forgave my son. But I never forgot what he did. And I made sure that the truth, the real truth, will live longer than either of us. I took a sip of tea. So, if you're watching this story, tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far my story travels. And if you believe that no one is ever too old to stand up for themselves, subscribe to the channel. There's a lot this old grandma still wants to say. I smiled again, a real one this time. This is Helen Carter, signing off from Maplewood. Thank you for listening to my story. The red recording light blinked for a few seconds, then faded out. I sat there quietly for a while, watching the steam rise from my cup. Somewhere outside, kids were laughing, playing in the street. Life went on, and so did I. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. My granddaughter Lily called, her voice bubbling with excitement. Grandma! Your story video, people are watching it. Like, really watching it. It's all over social media. I laughed softly. Oh, sweetheart, what do you mean all over? Thousands of views, Grandma. There are comments from people in Texas, New York, even Australia. They're saying you're brave and that your story made them cry. I didn't quite understand how it spread, but I could feel my heart warming. For the first time in years, people were listening to my voice, not out of pity, but respect. A few days later, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, David was standing there again. But this time, he wasn't angry or defensive. He looked tired, like someone who'd been running from his own shadow. Hi, Mom, he said quietly. I didn't answer right away. I stepped aside and nodded toward the living room. He walked in slowly, looking around at the old family photos. He sat down, twisting his hands together. I saw your video, he said after a moment. It went viral. I gave a small smile. So I heard. He swallowed. I didn't expect it to hit me like that. Hearing you tell it, seeing your face, it made me realize how far I've gone. I thought you hated me. I never hated you, David, I said softly. But I had to stop protecting you from your own choices. He nodded, eyes wet. I know. I ruined everything. And I can't change what I did, but I want to make things right. I looked at him for a long moment. He wasn't the little boy in the pictures anymore. He was just a man who had finally seen what greed had cost him. Then start by being honest, I said. Not with me, with yourself. He nodded again, wiping his face. I will, Mom. I promise. He stood to leave, but before he reached the door, he turned back. You know, Mom. People online love you. They call you the grandma with a spine of steel. I chuckled softly. Steel rusts, David. I just learned to bend before I broke. He smiled faintly and walked out, closing the door behind him. That night, I sat by the same camera again. I pressed record. Hello again, I said, smiling. It's Grandma Helen from Maplewood. A lot of you listened to my story about family and forgiveness. I just want to say thank you, from my heart. You made this old woman feel seen again. I leaned forward slightly. If you're someone who's been hurt by your own family, remember, revenge doesn't always mean pain. Sometimes, it means peace. It means telling your truth and walking away with your head high. I smiled softly. So tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I'd love to know who's out there listening. And if you believe everyone deserves a second chance, hit that subscribe button. Because this grandma still has a few stories left to tell. The red light blinked, then faded. I sat there in the quiet again, the same soft smile on my face. Outside, the wind rustled through the maple trees. Life had finally come full circle. A month later, I got a small envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name written in familiar handwriting. I opened it slowly. Inside was a short note and a photograph. The note said, "I started therapy, Mom. I got a job at the community center. I'm trying to be the son you deserved. Thank you for not giving up on me completely. Love, David." The photo was of him and Lily, both smiling in front of the same park where he used to play as a child. I held it for a long time, tears slipping down my cheeks, but they weren't sad tears. They were the kind that come when life finally feels balanced again. I placed the photo on my mantle, next to one of him as a boy, missing his front tooth. 2 pictures, side by side. One of who he was, and one of who he was trying to be again. That night, I sat down with a cup of tea and whispered, "We made it, didn't we?" The camera was still sitting on the counter. I turned it on one last time. "Hello, my dear friends," I said softly. "This is Grandma Helen from Maplewood, Indiana. You've been with me through every step of this story. And I want to thank you for listening, for believing, and for proving that no matter how old you are, your voice still matters." I smiled. If you're watching my story, tell me where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe, because this grandma might just have one more story left to tell. I winked at the camera, then pressed stop. Outside, the sun was setting behind the maple trees, turning the sky into shades of orange and gold. It was quiet, peaceful. For the first time in a long time, so was I.